Welcome to the What the Woman podcast. I am your host, Chrissy Gasberry-Cadre. I'm a national health editor and New York Times bestselling writer. Joining me today is my longtime friend, Ken Page. Ken is a licensed clinical social worker, the host of the Deeper Dating podcast, and author of the best-selling book, Deeper Dating, How to Drop the Games of Seduction and Discover the Power of Intimacy. That came out from Shambhala. Which year was that? I remember all of that.
Yeah, that was 2014.
Yeah, that sounds right. Ken's work has been featured in the Oprah magazine, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Cosmopolitan, The Advocate, and many more. I found you almost 15 years ago from, I think it was your blog on psychologytoday.com. And in my many years of relationship research, both professional and very, very personal, I just found your work to be so incredibly groundbreaking. And so what I want to do the first little while, Ken, I'm going to feel like I'm talking a lot, but I want us we have not been in touch over the past few years, partly just because of COVID and the way that the world has been. And I want to bring you up to speed on everything that, has kind of brought me up to here and now. That'll be a good chance to bring a lot of the audience up to speed too, because for people like you and me who we share a lot of our lives, but I really dipped out for a while. And again, part of that was just, circumstances with the pandemic, and stop me, pause me, ask me questions, try to think for our audience if I'm leaving gaps and things, but you're going to see where I'm going to bring you in, because we're going to talk about core gifts, which is one of your foundational philosophies. I think it's really, really insightful for obviously people who are looking for love, even people who are in relationships. I feel like it can really lead to some discovery about the self and perhaps about the relationship. But something you and I have never talked about before that I also wanted to talk about today is how maybe our core gifts inform our career path or, our mission, our purpose in life. So I'm going to jump in. I'm going to jump in with the story. And I outlined some notes to myself. And I talk about some of this in the memoir. So I should have brought a copy of the book, but this is my next memoir that is coming out April 29th from Hachette's Worthy Books, Show Don't Tell. And so I remember an afternoon when I was still living in Brooklyn, and you called me up and you said, Thich Nhat Hanh is going to be in the city giving a talk, and it's probably the last talk he's ever going to, this is going to be our last chance to see him. And I don't know if you remember this, but I remember I was walking my dog on the sidewalk right in front of my house, and I had such a bad cold. I physically knew I could not go to hear this talk, and I was bummed out. But it was kind of a phase, Ken, where it was getting to be a turning point, because if you remember, I was doing, after How to Love an American Man came out, I started ghostwriting. I was also working on an international project. There was a period of about 3 years where I was in hotels so much that when I needed to order new clothes, I would just have them shipped to whatever hotel I was going to be in next, and it was such an exciting time. It was, my early 30s, and there were parts of it that were thrilling, but for me, I think there are people like us, when you go that intensively, it's going to catch up at a certain point. And I was starting to evaluate in 2014, for a project I was working on, I went on, it was a book I was ghostwriting. I went on safari with Jeffrey Kent, a travel entrepreneur. He's been known as the travel guide to the stars. And I was in a relationship at that time that was a bit rocky, and he and I were sitting on the deck of his lodge, and when we were sipping sundowners, as they call them, it was basically happy hour, but he said to me, "You need to get in the driver's seat of your life. You need to get in the driver's seat of your life." And I heard that. And so when I returned from that trip to New York, I froze my eggs. And 3 months after that, I bought a house back in Pennsylvania. I decided that I was approaching my mid-30s. It was 2015. I feel like maybe things are a little bit different a decade later, but maybe that's just my purview. Like, I don't feel like women are panicking as much as they were, maybe because like we have these treatments that can help prolong our fertility and stuff. But so I moved back to PA, and that was sort of like, in my mind, Ken, I felt like I had sort of retired in a way. And I kind of wanted to, like, life in the city had been, my career. I had just like poured all of myself into my career for, almost 15 years, my whole life really at that point. And your career is not always there to comfort you in the difficult moments. And my career, I was reaching a point when, I was sometimes dealing with difficult folks in the business, or for me, it was difficult. I don't mean to say they were being difficult, but I started to realize that, like, it was really finally time to think about letting someone in. And you have talked about, when we finally get to the point when we're like ready for a healthy relationship, we stop being so sticky to, relationships that, as you call them, attractions of deprivation, right? Instead of attractions of inspiration. So, and that alone is so profound and so telling. I was back in Pennsylvania for almost 3 years, and you're trying to date, and what an interesting time between 2015, 2016. Politically, things are happening in this country that are unprecedented. My hometown, I think it's pretty rural, pretty conservative. I was finding, and I talk about this in the book, I was finding that culturally, beliefs were the same as when I had left in the late 90s, and so to meet somebody whose values were aligned with mine, like, it was increasingly getting clear that this was going to be tricky. In 2018, and I talk about this in the book too, as important as it was for me to be financially independent, to feel so good that I had reached a point when I could put my own roof over my head. I as sometimes happens, like, I was self-employed and I ran into this financial situation, and I talk in the book about how it was sort of like God knew that if he was going to get through to me, he was going to have to bring me to my knees through money, to slow me down and make me listen. I was going to that's where he was going to have to shoot me down. So, and that's what happened. And I was like, maybe self-employment is not the way anymore. Like, this ghostwriting stuff, it's stressful, it's hard. And maybe I need to open my mind to a shift. Like, maybe I need to go back to work. And I reached out to a friend of mine, a female who was, I would call her a business leader. And I was like, hey, I'm aware of this new business project that's happening in the community. Do you think there's any use for me or a way to plug me in? And she was like, I have something, come work on some marketing stuff with me. So I did. And when we started working together, she said, I'm going to bring you to a fundraiser. We're having a golf outing, and I'm going to introduce you to some of the executives. some new executives have moved to the area from different parts of the country. We've got really incredible leaders working on this. That was June 22nd of 2018. And that's the day I met my now husband. And you'll hear me refer to him as Q. Everybody who knows him really well knows him by Q. And he, I interviewed him as part of this project, and I think genuinely, he friended me on LinkedIn, and I had to follow up with him with some questions for the project. And he was like, "Hey, I want to get into tennis in the community. Do you have anybody you can introduce me to?" And I talk in the book about how it's actually my high school English teacher who the book is about. She put him in touch with some guys in the community, and he got into playing tennis a little bit. But that got to him saying, "I've always wanted to write books. Could I ask you some questions about it? Could we go out to dinner?" And then I remember our second date thinking of you. And I remember you saying, and I talk about this in the book, I mention you in the book at least twice that I can think of right now. I think even more than that. But I remember you saying, we can think that we have this bullet pointed list of what this person should possess. They need to be this height, they need to be funny, they should be really career minded or whatever. And you taught me the only thing that matters is pay attention to the way they make you feel. And you say, "Does my soul feel safe with this person?" And I just remember Ken, it was in sitting down, having dinner with him, and we had things in common. And I realized how much of a guard I had put up over the years, in one-on-one situations with men. And he just made it so comfortable and was inviting in the gentlest, most sincere way, was just inviting more conversation out of me, and I was like, "Oh, he actually wants to get to know me." And
that's so different to meet a person and
it's so
everything. You're not fighting, battling against this wall.
Exactly. Yeah. And he was kind of inviting me into myself as much as into the dialogue, and just letting me know that it was safe. So that was amazing. Yeah. And so we lived separately for the whole time we were in Pennsylvania. And then I have a list of all the events that started to happen. So the pandemic. Yeah, please. Yeah.
If you didn't approach that date from that place of how do I feel? Does my soul feel safe? Does my soul feel safe? If you didn't approach it that way, but more in the old way, trying to try to do it, how might that experience have played out differently?
Well, I guess I would answer that I think I don't know. I don't know, because it was so new to me to just be to just have, to just have an open conversation. But another point that made me think of you, I remember I canceled twice on him before I finally went out to dinner with him. And I was just like, why don't I don't know. You talk about the wave, or when there is that potential for actual intimacy with somebody who's genuine, you can feel some resistance to that. And he just stayed gently persistent. And finally, the third time he asked me out, I decided to go. I was just I don't really have a good reason not to. And then it was I talk about this in the book, and it's so vivid in my mind, from the first time from the moment I climbed into his vehicle, I was just he was so easygoing. He was so just relaxed and friendly, and his car was really clean. And he's known. I talk about this in the book too. He's known for kind of like, he always smells good. He always smells really good. And the car, it just smelled like warm and spicy. But a good question that you asked, because he wasn't my classic type. My classic type was dangerous for me, like over and over and over and over. And so thanks for that question. We stayed living in our own separate houses. It was we used to like joke, like, this is great. We live 7 minutes apart from each other and we hang out when we want to. And at night I would usually go home to my 2 dogs, and then he got diagnosed in February of 2021. He works in medicine, in healthcare, and he was having some just like weird symptoms. They seemed like was it acid reflux? And he was having this weird back pain. And because most of his best friends, they all trained together back home in their home country, and they came to visit him. And I was making them dinner the one night, and they were like, Chrissy, he needs a CT scan. And he listened to them, and finally he was diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma. He had a softball size mass in his belly. We went through 6 months of treatments at the Cleveland Clinic. He had a career change, like as soon as he was in remission. He ended up coming out to San Francisco a year after he had been diagnosed. He got a job out here. I was coming and going for the first year and a half that he was out here, and we got married. This is kind of like, and this wraps up the story. I just want people to kind of know I kept things private, and we were going through a lot of personal stuff between his health, some family stuff. I lost 2 pregnancies in a row, and before I lost the second one, like, we decided we've been through so much life together in half a decade. Let's like make it official. And we'd bought a home together. So we got married a year and a half ago. And I feel like sometimes you feel like, should we have invited people? And we really wanted to have a big celebration. I was wrapping up one book. I was starting my next memoir, and life was just, it was really intense and coming at us so fast. And we got married at the, county clerk's office on a Friday morning. And I say in the book, like, we went out to breakfast at our favorite diner afterward. And it was nice to just get to experience this internal transition that wasn't about the celebration. It wasn't about, oh my God, the money we're spending. It wasn't about, we have to entertain all these people. It was just like, we're committed forever now, and here we are just eating our omelets, so, so I want to talk with you about, I don't know if any of what I shared, segues us naturally to the core gifts conversation. There are things that, he loves about me. And there are so many people who I thought it was tough to date back when I was dating. And I'm hearing from people, the pandemic made it tougher, like just the way our culture is right now. Would you talk about core gifts in the context of relationships? And then I'll kind of, see if I can probe into whether it makes sense for the career conversation too.
Sure, it absolutely does make sense and connects to your entire story. So let me explain this concept.
Yeah, thanks.
If you imagine the image of, let's say a really expansive flower, like a peony or something like that, with tons and tons of petals. And, when you get in closer, to the middle of it. The petals are really tender, they're bruisable, they're fragile, and they're really beautiful. I think Robert Frost said nature's first green is gold, the hardest hue to hold.
Yep.
And that's like what greenness is. So the closer we get to the very core of our heart, to the beating heart of our humanity, the more bruisable we are, the more sensitive we are, the more beautiful we are. We're also connected to our life's meaning and also to this stream of impulses to connect with the world in an authentic way.
I love that.
And that's so connected to career and it's so connected to love. So if you picture a target image, and the closer you get into the center, the closer you're getting to the place of your most authentic self, your core gift. That is where your greatest power lies and where your greatest beauty lies. There's a quote from St. Catherine of Siena, or I think was the founder of the Dominican order, and was this in her time, this breathtakingly powerful woman.
Yes. I went to St. Catherine's school. My grade school was St. Catherine's school.
Oh
So,
my
my parish all growing up. Yes. So she's very powerful. Yeah.
Super powerful. A scholar, an ecstatic mystic, a profoundly effective diplomat for the church. Anyway, she had this sentence. She said, "Be who God intended you to be, and you will set the world on fire."
Wow.
And how we set the world on fire might be a quiet way. It might be setting our own insides on fire. I don't know what it would be, but there's something nuclear about when we can live from the core of our being. But it's terrifying.
Yeah.
It asks a quality of originality that, originality is scary to begin with because it's just you're stepping out onto a ledge. And in intimacy is the same thing. Every time you're with your partner and you want to ask for something that seems kind of weird, or you want to be touched in a certain way, or you want to be sexual in a certain way, and all of it feels like, oh my God, how am I going to ask that? How am I going to say that? There's an originality to what's there in the center. There is also power and an intense sensitivity. So the center of our being, where our nuclear power lies, where our core gifts lie, is a very hard place to live because those are the places we get the most hurt. Those are the places where the world won't understand us or will be too challenged by our power or our tenderness, our truth-telling, our fierceness, our originality. So we get squashed.
Yes.
And we learn to squash ourselves too. And this connects to career in a really interesting way. That's when we start leaning on the ways where we are most safe to express our power and our potential. And we avoid the places where life maybe feels more sensitive. So, Christy, you're a powerhouse. You're a powerhouse, but you're also filled with generosity and aliveness and humanness. And you were riding, this is my interpretation. It may not fit.
Yeah.
So you were riding those qualities, but how if you go to the gym and you're lifting weights, let's say you're doing your biceps, and the biceps are like a pretty small muscle group. So you lean back and you use your back to do your biceps. It's easier because your back is the big muscles. It hurts more to just do your biceps. So we learn to lean on the qualities when we're more easily powerful and avoid the ones which are more vulnerable. And so your power and your generativity are beautiful, incredible quality. You're so generative. I mean, always wanted to know you, how do you put all these things together? You amaze me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Those are beautiful qualities. But it seems to me like, in a way, you were leaning on those qualities which were the big muscles and not really working the small muscle, which was a deep vulnerability.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's true. I mean, I was ghostwriting for all these years for there was an Olympic athlete that I worked with, politicians, entrepreneurs, philanthropists, and writing my own memoir for the first time in 14 years. I mean, talk about needing to redevelop a muscle. Like it didn't come naturally to me like it did telling other people's stories. And it was just like, I know how to, you know how to write a story. Like when you've been doing so, I had developed that craft for long enough, but it's true that I was not going in. And meanwhile, and this, I kind of, it brings to a head like why I wanted to start this podcast. It's been it was something I was thinking about for the past few years. And, you need to kind of, you wait, you don't want to be impulsive. And I'm like waiting for the right people to come around and different steps come into play. And I talked with a couple partners about possibly joining me, and really very recently, it was like, I'm supposed to do this by myself. Like I'm getting the message clearly that this doesn't need to be a co-host situation. This is meant to be Chrissy, which I felt really weird about that. But, I was watching this Instagram video. Like I'm following I swear my entire Instagram feed is politics right now, rightfully so. And there was this minister, I'm not sure which denomination. I saw him, I think his name is the Blazing Praise and Preacher. And I was listening to one of his videos, and you know how like we learn in 12-step programs or in all the years I went to Catholic school and recited prayers, like you kind of learn to, if you have teachers who teach you this, you kind of look for the phrase within a passage or within a prayer that rises up for you. And I heard him say, his words were, fulfill your ministry. Mm-hmm. This was like 3 weeks ago. It was really, really recent. And I was like, Chrissy, just go. Like, it's time to do this. So can we, what are the steps for somebody who's trying to identify their core gift? If they're trying to figure out either, I'm like, gosh, I know that I want to be with somebody. I know I want to share my life with somebody. How do they discern what that core gift is? And I guess separately or not separately, if it for somebody who's maybe not as focused on relationship right now, but maybe trying to figure out life purpose. How can you walk through the exercise or how they can?
Sure can.
Yeah,
I sure can. But before I do, I'm
sure
talking about what you just said.
Yeah.
I'm kind of feeling called, like, this is what I need to do. This is another thing about that core gift case. Like, if you picture just, I think of that bullseye target, the target I described as having 3 zones. The gift zone, where you're living from kind of the truth of your gifts. Mm-hmm. The next zone down is the zone of protection. It's not where you're totally disconnected from yourself, but you're dumb, you've created some degree of a false self, you're kind of protective and moving through your life. And then the outside zone is the zone of disconnection, which is a very alienating, painful place. But the closer you get to your gift zone, to the center, the more you start getting messages. Your gift zone is constantly screaming out impulses, messages, wants, desires. And the more we live in that zone, the more we hear these whispers. And that's one of the greatest tasks that we can do in this strange and crazy and ever-changing world, is to listen to the whispers and have a ring of truth to them and then but like follow them. But you can't do that unless you're living in the living zone of your gift zone. It's hard for those messages to get through. So you were kind of saying, yeah. So you were kind of saying, I am living to some degree in my zone of protection.
Yeah.
To move more to my gift zone, and in that you found love.
Yeah.
And you found career shifts that were closer to your heart and your soul, because that's what happens when we live from that space. So the magical thing and the amazing thing about our gift zones is it's constantly streaming whispers and messages. And we can learn to listen to those. And when we do, they may scare us, but there's some way they feel so good. Because it's like, oh my God, like I have some sense of something solid in this crazy, strange world. So I wanted to say that first because you were describing that happening.
Yes.
And that's a function of your core gifts, is they are emitting asks, wants, hungers, desires, needs to give, qualities of generosity, whispers, and listening to the whispers is one of the greatest things we can do. So I just wanted to say
love it. Yep, that's good.
Yeah. And that is the heart of, they say that true vocation is the place where your great joy meets the world's great hunger. And it's just, yeah, that kind of says it, right?
Yeah.
The first step is, what's your great joy? Where are those whispers calling you? What are you aching to do? What are you aching to say? What are you most fascinated by? What are you most frightened and delighted by at the same time? What is that kind of edge for you? And so that's just such an important thing. And the more you live from your gifts, the more you live in your core gifts, the more you're going to be guided romantically, spiritually, and professionally to those things that really come from your heart, speak to your heart, consonant with who you are. So it's a thrilling journey. All of these core gift adventures are the greatest adventures in life. Like, who was it? Nikki Giovanni said, we love because it is the greatest adventure. And we live from our core gifts because that is the greatest adventure.
That is love. That's our expression of love to the world, right?
That's right. That's right. That's so true. So how do we find our core gifts?
Mm-hmm.
Well, one simple, I guess we mostly discover our core gifts through 3 different questions. They're really basic.
Yep.
What feeds your heart and your soul? What nourishes your heart and your soul? That's question 1. And I'm going to break that down a little bit more in a minute. Question number 2 is, what hurts your heart? What are the things that feel like paper cuts when you walk through life, or gashes, or wounds, or somebody stepping on something tender?
Yeah.
Or those inner petals of that flower are the most bruisable. So what are the things that hurt your heart? And I'll talk about how to turn that into an awareness of your core gift. And the third part, and this is an amazing one, is what is both most scarier and somehow most exciting to reveal in yourself.
Interesting.
Maybe you'll just feel scared. Those are the markers of your core gift. And when you live there, you will live a mission-driven life. So, okay, so let's break those down.
Yeah.
Your heart, right? Like, so you walk your life, and but what do you notice are sorts of things that hurt your heart, that you feel the team right when you witness or interact with it?
For me, something that comes up over and over, which is kind of part of the training, it's like you were saying, how we kind of talk ourselves out of our core gifts, is that a lot of times when I've gone to take a step like this, when I've pursued a project like this, you encounter people saying, for whatever reason, like, you can't do that. You need approval from so-and-so, or just kind of that. And I think it's part of what upsets me the most about what I see in the world is like when we try to limit each other's potential, when we, and each other's, we should all get to flourish from that place. I just believe that. I believe it, societally, politically, and so that's my answer to that question. It's like that came to me right away. I know that's what I have come up against. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's perfect because we can look at the things that hurt our heart.
Yeah.
Like for me, insensitivity is something that really hurts my heart. Like I feel it. I feel it. Just,
oh, yeah. Yeah.
There's a deep quality of sensitivity about me, which is the part of me that as a man and as a gay man, and easier in some ways, but also harder being gay, was the thing I was most ashamed of. So the thing I was most ashamed of was maybe one of my deepest core gifts. It's the thing that my students kind of appreciate the most about me or makes them feel the most safe. The thing that hurts us the most points to our core gift. And for you, I always think of one of your core gifts as being this wild quality of generativity, how you put things together, how you put people together. I am constant. There's a genius that you have in doing that. I remember when you invited me to speak at a conference, and it was in this fabulous hotel, and it was this person, everybody was waiting. It was, early on, and you got this gorgeous food and this gorgeous cake, and your family was there. These amazing people, some of whom are still friends of mine, were there.
Yeah.
Your generativity is not normal range. It is not normal range.
Oh my God. Thank you for that. That's so interesting. That's so interesting.
And that's where you get hurt the most, where the world is anti-generativity. That's what kills you.
That is.
Full gift.
That's so true. And it's something that like when my now husband, when he met me, he was really like holding a space for me to kind of come back out, and from the first couple of dates, and I remember I hosted a women's conference also back in Pennsylvania the month before the pandemic struck. And I know you have to go in just a minute here, but he was in the front row. It was a women's event. And there he is, it was a couple of years before we got married or even engaged, but he was like there and he picked up I had to go set up that morning. He picked up the keynote speaker. She was staying at my house and like in a snowstorm, he escorted her to the door and he's always supported where I'm in my greatest, space of empowerment. He's right there. I love that.
And you express that so powerfully. Do you mind if I just jump in and say about this? Yeah. Okay. So this is the other piece of this, is that you described that you had been wounded by a world that didn't invite that or appreciate it. And the beauty of this guy is that he invited it. And that speaks to, you had to create a descended self that didn't reveal that as fully. I'd still revealed it all over the place, but not in its full light, which includes your vulnerability and all these other parts of you. He brought that up, but it describes the way that you've protected yourself and created a defense structure, which was you were going to be you, but maybe not all of you.
Yeah.
So here's the formula of the universe, of humanity, of our experience, of our soul, of our intimacy journey. It's this. Inside our defensive structures lies our wounds. Inside each wound lies the gift that has been wounded, and inside each gift lies a connection to our deepest mission, a portal to our deepest self. So your defense was that you weren't living fully in your heart as all of you.
Yeah.
The wound was that wasn't allowed by the world. The gift underneath that is this quality, these qualities that we're talking about, and that is connected to your mission. And in your journey, you've honed your mission to now include the most profound vulnerability, which is like the memoir, the marriage, all our parts. So kind of it's it's a powerful, powerful understanding of how, as we learn to name our core gifts, and in my 6-month intensives, we spent 3 months working on naming and identifying and developing a love relationship with our core gifts. And in all of my work, I teach that. So that's just some of the magic of our core gifts.
That's amazing. I mean, if you had to put it in a nutshell, I feel like I've heard you say, like, within our deepest vulnerability is actually our greatest power. Am I kind of framing that accurately?
Exactly. That was the Psychology Today article that got like millions of reads and actually led to an ebook, which everyone could get for free just by going to deeperdatinggifts.com. It's an ebook with those viral concepts and how they built this whole kind of way of thinking. Understanding. Yep.
That's great. That's great. Let me let you go. I know you need to run. I appreciate that. You know, you're going to come back on this show sometime. You've been my amazing first guest, Ken. Thank you so much.
So pleased and privileged to be your first guest. And you were my first supporter. I'm very appreciative of that.
Full circle. Oh, I appreciate you so much. We'll talk more. I'll take you off the stage now and let you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have to tell a story about Ken when he was referring to the women's conference where he was my keynote speaker, our keynote speaker. This was in New York in 2012, maybe. We did a TV appearance together. It was a public event and we were inviting all of the, whoever wanted to come, and you can buy a ticket. And so we did an appearance together on a New York morning news show. And it's, I won't name the name, but one of the Real Housewives was there to appear on the same show that morning. And she heard him speaking on camera with me about this women's event and his work and what we were going to be covering. And so when our segment was over, she pulled him aside and she was like, I need you in my life. I need to talk with you. I think there was a relationship situation happening. And I was like, you go. It was just pretty cool. He's just so brilliant and insightful and so fun to learn from. So I hope that we have equipped you with some really, fierce new insight today. It's wild out there, times for like relationships and career. I mean, I know in the industry where I work right now, there are layoffs. I mean, there are layoffs across so many industries, and it's calling for a lot of life reflection. So I hope that this was helpful to our listeners. Drop notes in the comments if you have questions. We're getting the website up and going. You can imagine book launch business. It's, when the book is coming in just a couple weeks, life is really, really hectic. Every spare moment is dedicated to all of this. So looking forward to sharing a lot more. Find Ken Page. You can go to deeperdating.com. He's Ken Page, LCSW, if you're looking for more of his work. Again, that's Ken Page, LCSW. I am Chrissy Gasberry-Caudry. My second memoir comes out April 29th. Show Don't Tell, a writer, her teacher, and the power of sharing our stories. We all have stories. We all have gifts. We all have journeys to embrace those gifts. Because Ken's right. The world doesn't always, let us live there, or we don't think that the world will. So thank you for giving me the space, venturing in with mine. I have felt really, really called to do this work and share with all of you in this way. And just so happy that it's finally happening. We'll see you next episode. Thank you.